She promised she was saving money for my college. Instead, she bought a fancy car for her young boyfriend. When I asked, "What about my university?" she said, "You'll figure it out. I've always supported you." I'm shaking as I write this. My hands are literally trembling and I can't seem to stop them. I've been staring at my laptop screen for 3 hours now, trying to figure out how to even begin explaining what just happened to my life. Maybe if I write it all down, it'll start making sense. Maybe the crushing weight in my chest will lift just a little bit. I'm 22 years old and I've been working since I was 14. Not because I wanted to buy fancy clothes or go to concerts like other kids. I worked because my grandmother told me that if I showed responsibility and saved every penny I could, she would match whatever I put away for college. She said education was the most important thing in the world and that she'd make sure I got mine. My grandmother raised me after my parents died in a car accident when I was 8. She was already in her 50s then, working double shifts at the local factory to keep us afloat. Money was always tight, but she made it work somehow. She'd buy generic everything, clip coupons until her fingers cramped, and wear the same 3 dresses in rotation. But she always told me that my future was worth every sacrifice. When I turned 14, I got my first job bussing tables at a diner downtown. The work was brutal, my back ached constantly from clearing heavy plates, and I'd come home every night with my clothes reeking of grease and cigarettes. But every 2 weeks I'd march to the bank and deposit my entire paycheck into what my grandmother called our education fund. She'd smile so proudly when I showed her the growing balance. Throughout high school, I worked that same job while my classmates went to football games and parties. I missed prom because I couldn't afford a dress and couldn't justify taking a night off work. I watched my friends get their licenses and drive around town while I walked everywhere because gas money was college money. Every time I felt sorry for myself, my grandmother would remind me that temporary sacrifices led to permanent improvements. The summer after graduation, I picked up a second job doing inventory at a warehouse. I'd work the diner from 6 in the morning until 2 in the afternoon, then head straight to the warehouse until 11 at night. I was exhausted all the time, surviving on energy drinks and sheer determination. My hands were covered in cuts from handling boxes and I developed this constant headache from the fluorescent lights. But the account was growing and that's all that mattered. By my 21st birthday, I had saved almost $15,000. Combined with what my grandmother promised to contribute, I'd have enough for at least 2 years of community college, maybe more if I was careful. I remember feeling so proud when I checked the balance that day. All those missed parties, all those early mornings and late nights, all those times I ate ramen for dinner while my coworkers went out, it was all going to be worth it. That's when my grandmother started talking about her new boyfriend. She met him at the grocery store where she'd started working part-time after the factory closed down. He was 25, which should have been my first red flag, but I was so focused on my own goals that I didn't pay much attention. My grandmother seemed happier than she'd been in years, humming while she cooked and actually buying herself new clothes for the first time I could remember. She started spending more time away from home, coming back late with this giddy energy that reminded me of how teenagers act when they're in love. Part of me was happy for her. She'd sacrificed so much for me over the years and she deserved some joy. But another part of me felt uneasy about how quickly things were moving between them. They'd only been dating for 3 months when she started talking about him like they'd been together for years. The day before I planned to start applying to colleges, my grandmother asked me to sit down for a serious conversation. She had this strange look on her face, not quite guilty, but not entirely comfortable either. She told me that her boyfriend's car had broken down and that he needed reliable transportation to get to work. She said she decided to help him out by covering the cost of a new vehicle. My stomach dropped before she even finished explaining. I asked her how much a car would cost and she got defensive, saying it wasn't about money but about helping someone she cared about. When I pressed her for details, she finally admitted that she'd already made the purchase. A brand new sedan fully loaded with all the extras. The total cost was $18,000. I felt the blood drain from my face as the math clicked into place. I asked her where she'd gotten that kind of money, even though I already knew the answer. She'd taken it from our education fund, not just her contribution, but mine too. 8 years of my life, 8 years of backbreaking work and sacrifice, gone in a single afternoon to buy a car for someone she'd known for 3 months. When I asked about my college plans, she gave me that line about figuring it out and how she'd always supported me. She said I was smart and capable and that I'd find another way to pay for school. She suggested I could take out student loans like everyone else, as if the debt wouldn't follow me for decades. She acted like spending my college fund was just a minor inconvenience, something I'd easily overcome. I couldn't speak for several minutes. I just sat there staring at her, trying to process what she'd done. This woman who'd raised me, who'd taught me the value of hard work and sacrifice, had just thrown away my entire future for a man she barely knew. The betrayal cut deeper than I'd ever imagined possible. That night, I called the bank to confirm what I already knew. The account was empty. Every dollar I'd earned, every sacrifice I'd made, every dream I'd carefully constructed over the years, all of it was gone. I sat on my bedroom floor and cried until I thought I might throw up. The 8 years of missed experiences, the social isolation, the physical exhaustion, none of it had mattered in the end. I barely slept for the next week. I'd lie awake calculating how long it would take me to save up that money again, knowing that college costs would only increase while I was trying to rebuild my fund. At 22, I felt ancient compared to the typical college freshman. By the time I'd have enough money saved, I'd be in my 30s, competing for entry-level jobs with people a decade younger than me. Update 1. It's been 6 weeks since I posted this, and I honestly didn't expect so many people to respond. Reading through all your comments has been overwhelming in the best way possible. Some of you shared similar experiences, and it helped me realize I wasn't alone in dealing with family financial betrayal. Others offered practical advice that I hadn't even considered. The most common suggestion was to confront my grandmother more directly about the situation. I'd been avoiding serious conversations with her because I was still processing my own anger and didn't trust myself to stay calm. But after reading your responses, I realized that letting this fester wasn't helping anyone. I sat down with my grandmother last weekend and laid out exactly how her decision had affected me. I showed her printed copies of all my bank statements from the past 8 years, highlighting every deposit I'd made. I calculated the exact number of hours I'd worked and the experiences I'd missed. I wanted her to see the scope of what had been taken from me. Her reaction was not what I expected. Instead of showing remorse or understanding, she became defensive and angry. She accused me of being selfish and ungrateful, saying that she'd raised me for 14 years without asking for anything in return. She said that helping her boyfriend was important to her happiness and that I should be supportive of her relationship. The conversation escalated quickly. She told me that I was being dramatic about the whole college situation and that plenty of people succeed without higher education. She said I was too dependent on her and that this was an opportunity for me to learn independence. The more she talked, the clearer it became that she'd already justified her actions to herself completely. What really stung was when she said that I'd been living in her house rent-free for years and that she could have charged me for room and board if she'd wanted to. She calculated that if I'd been paying market rate for my room, it would have cost me more than the amount she'd taken from my college fund. In her mind, she was actually doing me a favor by only taking the education money. The argument ended with her telling me that if I was so unhappy with her choices, I was free to find somewhere else to live. She said she was tired of walking on eggshells in her own home and that she deserved to make decisions about her own money without being guilt-tripped by her granddaughter. I moved out the next day. I'd been saving some money separately for emergencies, so I had enough for a security deposit on a tiny studio apartment across town. It's honestly not much bigger than my childhood bedroom, and the rent takes up most of my income, but at least I don't have to pretend everything is fine every day. The weirdest part is how normal she's acting about the whole situation. She's posted photos on social media of her and her boyfriend with the new car, looking completely happy and carefree. She's even tagged me in some of the posts as if I should be celebrating with them. The disconnect between her perception of events and reality is honestly disturbing. Some of you asked about the boyfriend's role in all this. I did some digging and found out that he knew exactly where the money came from. He actually helped her close the account and arrange the car purchase. When I confronted him directly, he had the audacity to tell me that my grandmother was a grown woman who could make her own financial decisions. He said I should be grateful that she'd found happiness at her age instead of trying to control her choices. The most frustrating part is that everyone in our extended family is staying neutral. They keep saying it's between my grandmother and me, and they don't want to take sides. But their silence feels like complicity. They're letting her rewrite the narrative where she's the victim and I'm the ungrateful granddaughter who's trying to control her life. I've been working extra shifts at both jobs, trying to rebuild my savings from zero. It's demoralizing to be back where I started 8 years ago, but I'm determined not to let this destroy my future completely. I've been researching scholarship opportunities and grants that I might qualify for, though most are aimed at recent high school graduates. The loneliness is the hardest part. My grandmother was my only family, and now I'm completely on my own. I've never felt so isolated in my life. Some days I wonder if I should just apologize and try to repair our relationship, even though I know I didn't do anything wrong. The silence in my tiny apartment is deafening, and I miss having someone to talk to about everyday things. Update 2. Another 2 months have passed, and my life has changed in ways I never could have predicted. After my last update, several people reached out to me privately with offers of help and support. One person in particular changed everything for me. A woman who'd read my story messaged me about a program at her company that provides educational funding for employees. She worked in the HR department of a mid-sized tech company that had trouble retaining workers and had started offering tuition reimbursement as a benefit. She said they were also hiring for entry-level positions and that I should apply. I was skeptical at first because I didn't have any experience in tech, but she assured me that they provided training for motivated employees. The position was in customer support, helping clients troubleshoot software issues. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid significantly more than my restaurant and warehouse jobs combined. The application process was nerve-wracking. I'd never done a formal interview before, and I was convinced I'd blow it. But something about my story seemed to resonate with the hiring manager. She told me later that she'd also had to overcome family financial obstacles to get her education, and she saw potential in me. I started the job 3 weeks ago, and it's been a complete adjustment. I'm learning new systems every day, and my brain feels like it's stretching in ways it hasn't since high school. The work is challenging but engaging, and for the first time in years, I'm excited about going to work instead of just enduring it. The tuition reimbursement program covers up to $10,000 per year for job-related courses and degree programs. I've already enrolled in community college classes for the spring semester, focusing on business administration and computer science. It's not the traditional college experience I'd imagined, but it's a real path forward. Even better, several of my new coworkers have become genuine friends. They invited me to join their weekly trivia night, and I've been going regularly. It's the first time in years that I've had a social life that didn't revolve around work schedules. Last weekend, one of them helped me move into a better apartment, still small, but with actual windows and a kitchen that functions properly. The most unexpected development is that my grandmother has been trying to contact me. She's called, texted, and even showed up at my old apartment looking for me. According to my former neighbor, she seemed genuinely upset when she found out I'd moved without telling her. She's left several voicemails apologizing and asking me to call her back. I finally responded to one of her messages last week. She told me that things with her boyfriend had gotten complicated. Apparently, he'd been pressuring her to co-sign for additional loans and credit cards, using their relationship as leverage. When she finally said no, he became angry and accusatory, claiming she didn't trust him enough to build a real future together. The situation escalated when he crashed the car she bought him while driving under the influence. He wasn't seriously injured, but the car was totaled, and his insurance didn't cover the full replacement cost. He expected her to buy him another vehicle, and when she refused, he ended their relationship and moved out of state. My grandmother was devastated, not just by the breakup but by the realization of what she'd sacrificed for someone who never truly cared about her. She told me she'd been trying to figure out how to make things right between us, but she didn't know where to start. She said she'd been too proud and too embarrassed to admit that she'd made a terrible mistake. Part of me felt vindicated hearing about her boyfriend's true character, but mostly I just felt sad for both of us. She'd thrown away our relationship and my future for someone who'd been using her from the beginning. The money was gone, the trust was broken, and we'd both lost months of time we could never get back. I agreed to meet with her for coffee last Sunday. It was awkward at first. We hadn't spoken face-to-face since our argument 3 months earlier. She looked older and more tired than I remembered, and I could tell the stress had taken a toll on her. She apologized more thoroughly than I'd expected. She acknowledged that she'd betrayed my trust and stolen my future, not just borrowed money. She admitted that she'd been so lonely and desperate for companionship that she'd made terrible decisions without considering the consequences. She said she'd been trying to feel young and desirable again, and that had clouded her judgment completely. What surprised me was that she'd been researching ways to help me rebuild my college fund. She'd looked into selling her house and downsizing to a smaller place, using the difference to repay what she'd taken. She'd also been investigating whether there were any legal ways to recover money from her ex-boyfriend, though that seemed unlikely. I told her about my new job and the tuition reimbursement program. She was genuinely happy for me, and for the first time in months, our conversation felt natural and caring. She said she was proud of how I'd handled the situation and that she was amazed by my resilience and determination. We're taking things slowly, trying to rebuild our relationship step by step. I'm not ready to fully trust her again, and I may never be able to depend on her financially the way I once did. But she's still the woman who raised me, who taught me the value of hard work, who sacrificed for years to give me a stable home after my parents died. She's been coming to my trivia nights occasionally, and my coworkers love her stories about her factory days. She's also started volunteering at a local food bank, saying she wants to focus on helping others instead of dwelling on her mistakes. It's not a complete resolution, but it feels like we're moving in the right direction. Final update. It's been almost a year since this whole ordeal began, and I wanted to share a final update on how everything turned out. This will probably be my last post on this topic as I'm ready to move forward with my life. I'm now halfway through my second semester of college, maintaining a 3.8 GPA while working full-time. The balance is exhausting, but manageable. I've discovered that I have a real aptitude for computer programming, and I've been taking extra courses in that area. My company has noticed my progress and hinted that there might be opportunities for advancement in their development department. The most significant change is that I've started dating someone I met in one of my programming classes. He's a few years older than me and went back to school after spending time in the military. He understands what it's like to have an unconventional path to education, and he doesn't judge me for being older than the typical college student. We've been together for 4 months now, and he's been incredibly supportive of my goals. My relationship with my grandmother has continued to improve gradually. She did end up selling her house and moving into a senior living community that she actually loves. The change in environment has been good for her. She's made friends, joined activities, and seems more content than she's been in years. She used part of the money from the house sale to establish a small education fund in my name, though I've told her I'm managing fine on my own now. More importantly, she's been working on herself. She joined a support group for people who've been taken advantage of financially, and she's learned to recognize the warning signs of manipulative relationships. She's dating again, but more cautiously this time, and she keeps her finances completely separate from her romantic life. The most surprising development is that I've reconnected with some extended family members who reached out after hearing about our situation. Several cousins and aunts have apologized for staying neutral during our conflict, saying they should have been more supportive. One of my cousins even offered me a part-time internship at her marketing firm for this summer, which could lead to great opportunities after graduation. I've also been able to help other people going through similar situations. I've answered dozens of private messages from people whose family members have stolen their savings or betrayed their trust in other ways. It's heartbreaking how common these stories are, but it's also rewarding to offer practical advice and emotional support to people who feel as lost as I once did. Looking back, I can see that this crisis, as devastating as it was at the time, forced me to become more independent and resourceful than I might have been otherwise. I had to learn to advocate for myself, to seek out opportunities, and to build a support network from scratch. These are skills that will serve me well throughout my life. I'm not grateful for what my grandmother did. The betrayal still hurts, and I'll never fully trust anyone with my financial future again. But I am grateful for how it all worked out in the end. I have a career path I'm excited about, relationships that are based on mutual respect and support, and a future that feels full of possibilities. The hardest lesson I learned is that family doesn't guarantee loyalty, and that the people who claim to love you the most are sometimes capable of causing the deepest wounds. But I also learned that resilience is a choice, that there are good people willing to help if you're brave enough to ask, and that setbacks don't have to become permanent defeats. My grandmother and I will never have the relationship we once had, but we've built something new that works for both of us. She's learned to respect my boundaries, and I've learned to forgive without forgetting. We have dinner together every few weeks, and she comes to some of my college events when her schedule allows. To anyone reading this who's dealing with family financial betrayal or any other major setback, you're stronger than you know, and your future isn't determined by what other people do to you. It's determined by how you respond to what they do. Focus on what you can control, seek out opportunities wherever you can find them, and don't be afraid to ask for help when you need it. This chapter of my life is finally closed, and I'm excited to see what comes next.